Good morning, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the January 27th, 2025 regular meeting of County Council. I have a hard time believing that we're a quarter of the way through this century. It doesn't seem very long ago that we had that Y2K scare, you know, but anyway, maybe that's just for those of us who are a little older, but anyway, we're making progress in the century. Let's hope it's a good year. I'll ask the clerk for a call to adopt the agenda.
It's moved by Councillor Broad, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre, that the meeting of the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry be hereby called to order.
All those in favor? Carried.
Could I, excuse me, Warden?
Go ahead.
In addition to the agenda, under miscellaneous business, I'd like to just briefly talk about the Border Mayors Alliance that has started, if you don't mind. Under 14.
There we are. All right, thank you. Anything else to add or take away from the agenda? Madam Clerk?
It's moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bergeron, that Council approve the agenda as amended.
All those in favor? It's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Adoption of the minutes, December 13th and December 16th.
It's moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Broad, that the minutes of the meetings of the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry, including the in-camera minutes held December 13th and 16th, 2024, be adopted as circulated.
All those in favor? That's everybody. Carried. Delegations, I don't see any. Action requests, committee appointments. Madam Clerk.
It's moved by Councillor Densham, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry confirm the appointments as set out in the committee appointments report.
Any comments or discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried. We're moving right along. Something will put a hiccup into it, I'm sure. Under transportation, approval to negotiate with EVB Engineering on Main Street, Alexandria. Madam Clerk.
It's moved by Councillor MacDonald, seconded by Councillor Bergeron, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry authorize the Director of Transportation Services to engage EVB Engineering to finalize the scope of work and costs necessary to complete the detailed design of Main Street, Alexandria.
Thank you. Mr. Don.
Thank you. I won't spend too much time going through the report, as I'm sure Council has reviewed it and has seen what's being requested by staff. From our position, this is the best way to move this project forward. We've reached an impasse with our previous design firm that was engaged to do the work and have subsequently terminated the contract with them, and we're looking to move forward with the second place engineering firm, which was EVB Engineering. We are in the midst of the design, so for the consultant to kind of, we feel staff's position is it's in the best interest of the project to move forward, just to have them come in and kind of take over where we are right now. We do have a work plan with EVB Engineering that was submitted at the time the proposal was provided to the counties. So we're able to kind of assess where we are in the design phase and kind of pick up from there with the work plan. Ultimately, what we'd be looking for EVB Engineering to do is just update their hourly rates based on the staff that have been identified, which, you know, generally from when we look at RFPs, we see hourly rates increase over time, of course, as it would be with any other organization. So that's where we are right now. Certainly looking for Council's support on this, but if Council wishes us to go back to the drawing board, that's an alternative option as well, and staff can take that direction. It's just ultimately kind of what we feel is in the best interest of the project is what we're presenting to Council at this time.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Karma. Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm glad that this project's back on the table, and it's good to hear that you've moved on to a new engineering company, EVB. I quite agree with you that EVB, you know, it would be a good choice because they're very familiar with North Glengarry and our infrastructure. I also know that they're very busy. Very, very busy because we've engaged them in some projects, and admittedly, you know, because they're so busy, sometimes there's some delays. And I'm just wondering if you have any concerns about that.
So in speaking with the staff there, they've assured me that they have the capacity to do the work. I mean, I would not expect that they're going to, after this meeting today, that we're going to get something next week. I think that's a little unreasonable, but I do know that they, you know, before they get too far into the weeds on this project, where it is and kind of what those outcomes are, they obviously would like some confirmation that they're engaged to do the work, which is completely fair and I think a reasonable kind of suggestion from them. From our perspective, what I would really like to see, I think that, you know, there are some challenges in the economic landscape right now ahead of us that often suggests that there is stimulus funding that comes out. So I really want to position ourselves as an organization where we have a large project ready to go that actually kind of fits the mold of what some of those projects have historically tried to be and look like. So, you know, local economy, local small town type of projects that really are impactful. And I think that, you know, pushing this ahead through this year is exactly where we need to be, and having a tender ready project by the end of the year is where we will be well positioned if we're in that, if we move forward like that.
Thanks. Any other questions? Seeing nothing. All those in favor? That's everyone's carried. Thank you. Tenders and quotations. Tender award Lunenburg Bridge. Madam Clerk.
It's moved by Councillor Broad, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry accept the tender from Willis Care Contracting Limited for the comprehensive rehabilitation of the Lunenburg Bridge at their unit prices totaling $980,088 plus HST, and that Council provide the Director of Transportation Services the authority to sign all documents to give effect to the contract.
Mr. Hahn. Don.
Thank you very much, and I've got Mr. Brownell up here with me, our Manager of Capital Works and Bridges, here to answer any detailed questions Council may have, because he's got intimate knowledge in this project and what's taking place here. A very straightforward tender for rehab of Lunenburg Bridge, which is on County Road 18, just east of Lunenburg. Pretty straightforward type of work, and we had, and I'll give credit to Matt. He worked hard to get this out before Christmas, and I think when you see the prices we got and the level of interest that we had in this project, it goes to show you getting some of these tenders out earlier before, you know, at that time of year was actually quite fantastic. So a good lesson learned for us, and that's how we're going to be, you know, kind of positioning ourselves as we work through this year so that we're in the same type of position. So if there's any questions, happy to answer them, but look forward to Council's consideration of this one.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. It's awarded. And biennial bridge inspections, joint tender.
It's moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry approve the proposal for professional engineering services from HP Engineering to complete the 2025 biennial bridge inspections for an upset limit of $151,025 plus HST, and authorize the Director of Transportation Services to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract. The work includes the following partners: SDG Counties, Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, North Dundas, South Stormont, North Glengarry, and South Glengarry.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. You would see this around your council tables every 2 years, and one of these type of projects where we've been able to, over the years, start to incorporate some local municipalities on this tender. So now it is a joint RFP with everyone, save and except North Stormont, who has a consultant they prefer working with, which is completely up to them. So they elected not to participate in this joint tender. We submitted proposals, and this is our OSIM inspections, or biennial bridge inspections. It's very it's a tough gig to be in if you're a consulting firm, because you have to be well set up for it. So it is somewhat challenging to get firms to respond to this one, because there are only, I'm going to say, a handful that are well positioned to provide this at a very economical price. We're satisfied with HP Engineering, and one element I do want to point out to council with this is we've talked a lot about collaborating in this is a great example of collaboration, but each municipality will still receive kind of their report at the end of the inspection. But one thing that I see, and I'd love to get council's input and I guess maybe thumbs up of support in it, is actually spending a little bit more money beyond what this RFP says and look at some collaboration opportunities for bundling projects moving forward. So as an example, and it doesn't necessarily even have to include the county, but I think of North and South Dundas as an example. If they've got some similar structures where it would make sense to provide that to a consultant and be able to kind of bundle a project together, why not? So I feel like we're well positioned, just being the kind of director of this, the directors or orchestra directors of this project, to fund that work. I don't think it would be overly expensive, and really it's a little bit of data analysis, so I see it as a couple days work actually for the consultant. And the beauty is that he's got our entire inventory of all of our respective bridges that they can look at. So I feel very confident that we could get some interesting insight and analysis and suggestions for joint tendering opportunities at the conclusion of this work.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Councillor McDonald from the South.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Warden. For your thumbs up, thumbs down question, I think you had mentioned a previous meeting perhaps funding them, so I'd probably be thumbs down to that just to go back to that question, but this one I do like the idea of if we have shared infrastructure, why not have one person look at it. In looking at this, and as somewhat of a competitive person, I like that there's you can throw a towel over everybody else's per bridge cost, but ours in South Glengarry is $468, and the rest kind of range from, I think it's $341 to $354. So I was just curious if it's just because we're in eastern Ontario, or we have bigger, better bridges, or maybe that's a local question, but it just seemed we're about 33% higher than the highest of everybody else, and I was just curious about that amount, if you know.
I'll give it to Matt.
So actually, South Glengarry is doing a few extra items. So there is something that you may not see detailed there that's kind of behind the scenes, I'll say.
Yes, go ahead.
And then that price then to you is justifiable? It's just, okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Great, and sorry if I missed something in the report there, it's just I'll look at numbers first.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? And that's everybody. Thank you. It's carried. And we're on to bylaws, tax ratios. Madam Clerk.
It's moved by Councillor Broad, seconded by Councillor Densham, that bylaw number 5480, being a bylaw to establish property tax ratios for SDG counties and for municipal purposes for the year 2025, be read and passed in open council, signed and sealed.
Rebecca.
Good morning, Council. So I'm able to present the two bylaws back to back together as they do marry up with each other. So the first one is the tax ratio bylaw. This is to establish the 2025 tax ratios, which have remained unchanged for many years, with the exception of 2025 does have a new property class called the aggregate extraction property class. The province has notified us on December 11th what the ratio for this class will be. There is a reduction factor, but the ratio is set at 1.679029 for the county. So these tax ratios distribute the tax burden between the property classes, and the residential tax ratio is always equal to 1. These ratios have no financial impact overall, but they are required in order to set the tax rates, which is the next bylaw. So any questions on the tax ratios?
Go ahead, Mr. Densham.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thanks, Rebecca. I'm just wondering whether or not you have at your fingertips kind of how this plays out, because the introduction, as I see it, the introduction of the new tax class is actually going to potentially reduce for the businesses what they pay in taxes. That's going to be absorbed residentially. Do you have some numbers to say, how much money is actually shifting around here, and what's the effect on the individual residential?
I did actually briefly do that this morning. So when we when we discussed the budget in December, we used the industrial class as where this aggregate extraction would be placed, because that is where they were previously. Overall, the the change would mostly affect the residential because they're the biggest class. So when we discussed the budget, the increase was approximately 4.89% increase to the residential tax rate. Now it is 4.94. So in context of dollars, previously we were at per 100,000 of assessment $31.16. Now we're at $31.48. So it's very, very minimal. In future years, in 2026 and future years, the reduction factor, the county has the ability to establish a new ratio within the allowable ranges that the province establishes. So we are going to be able to increase this ratio next year.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we're on tax rates.
So
sorry, Councillor Landry, did you have your hand up? All right. It sounded like you said no, but your mic was off.
Sorry, can you hear me now, Mr. Warden?
Yes, I can.
Okay, no, I just put my hand for, I was in favor.
All right, thank you. Must be a slight delay there. Go ahead.
So the next bylaw is the tax rate bylaw. So this establishes the tax rates for 2025, which will result in tax revenue of $61.7, almost $61.8 million, which is an increase of $3.6 million over the previous year. So this will, as I mentioned earlier, increases the residential property taxes 4.94%, which once approved, this bylaw also approves the 2025 budget.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
So the motion for this bylaw is moved by Councillor Densham and seconded by Councillor MacDonald, that bylaw number 5481, being a bylaw for the purpose of adopting and raising the general upper tier levy for the year 2025, be read and passed in open council, signed and sealed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Sorry, I forgot to get you at the beginning. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we're on to consent agenda. Madam Clerk.
It's moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bergeron, that all items listed under the consent agenda section of the agenda be received for information purposes.
Any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Mr. MacDonald?
And thank you, and through you, Mr. Warden. Looking at this would be 9/1 monthly financial summary. It is showing 4.7 million of a surplus to date. I know that the counties are typically decently ahead of the lower tiers, so I'm wondering just how close to year end we would be, because that number can obviously change quite drastically with like SALT numbers as well as year-end entries.
Just so everyone can hear me, there's no batteries in the mics over there, so I'll answer your question here. So year-end 2024, as you're aware, we have, excuse me, we still receive a lot of invoices throughout the month of January that apply to the previous year. So we're currently, we're going to be cutting that off at the end of this week, January 31st, and posting all that information and those amounts in 2024, as well as reconciling receivables, payables, currently receiving the tax reconciliations for all the municipalities, so we'll be able to accommodate the subs, omits, record all that information. We need to communicate with the City of Cornwall their year-end tax reconciliations for excuse me, shared services, so the Lodge and EMS will be receiving that information shortly. As well as once all of that information is taken into consideration and posted, we start looking at reserve transactions based on budget, and then we look at reserve transactions based on projects that are ongoing. So those entries still have to be made, as well as SALT inventory restatement. So that I'm giving a big description, but just so that you're understanding. So my hope, we are set to do our audit in March, and we will have all of that information available most likely end of February is my goal.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald from the North.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And every treasurer's favorite question. In your professional opinion, do you anticipate a surplus?
At this point, it might be a loaded question, but I do anticipate a surplus. If there's a surplus, would be in the roads department, so that goes to the Now Needs Roads Reserve. There might be also a surplus in other areas, however, more minimal. I don't see a deficit.
Thank you. Anything further? Anything on any of the rest of the consent agenda? Seeing nothing, call the question. All those in favor? It's everyone. Thank you. It's carried. Boards and committees. Warden's report. I can give a bit of a warden's report here. Just a few of the things that I've been involved in on behalf of yourselves, and not always alone, sometimes with other councillors as well. The RED grant funding was on December 17th after our last meeting. We received some money for the jail. I'm pretty sure everyone's aware of that. But nice part about it, we got to meet with Parliamentary Assistant Steve Pinsino afterwards and Minister Quinn, and they gave us quite a bit of their time, which was much appreciated. Attended the inauguration for Prescott Russell. Eva Laviolette is the new warden in Prescott Russell. Seems like a really nice guy. Did a media interview. It was quiet over Christmas, then did a media interview on January 7th about the hiring of Dr. Crevier and our sponsorship of that hiring, and we look forward to hopefully something else coming out of that. January 9th and 10th was the Warden's Caucus in Kingston. Mr. McDonald and myself attended that along with CAO Adams. A good meeting. I think some frank discussions. The ministers that spoke were very plain and blunt, which was kind of good to hear for once. And we talked a bit about starting some collaboration with the counties to the south of us in the U.S. to kind of help the thing with Mr. Trump there to move forward, and we've made some progress on that. So there'll be more to hear about that in the future, but there's been some communication back and forth. So hopefully that continues to go. Looking around the table, I think most of us were at Roma. I thought it was a great Roma. There was numerous delegations. I think Eastern Ontario Warden's Caucus had 6. I know I did a joint one, and Mr. McDonald did it with myself, did a joint one with Cornwall on social services. I think it went over quite well. I joined North Dundas for their one on Listom Road. Minister, well, wasn't quite the minister, but did seem to listen and hear, so hopefully something good comes out of that. And then I want to thank South Dundas for inviting us. There was quite a few of us actually at their last council meeting. Kristen, Kimberly, Maureen, myself, Ben. Anyway, we were happy to be there and glad to see how their council works. And they invited me back on Saturday for the opening of Valecraft Homes, 313 homes getting started there. Pretty exciting project by the sounds of it. So thanks for that to South Dundas. And that's all I've got. So I'll go to a joint liaison. Councillor McDonald. Library Board. Mr. Broad.
Happy to give the update on behalf of the other councillors. We met in the beautiful branch in Alexandria on January 16th. We accepted all the reports from the branch supervisors, library, tech, manufacturing, but we did accept the report from the marketing and communication plan, which you'll see in the next agenda. What we really got dug into and discussed was we've returned to pre-pandemic numbers on a lot of areas on the statistical side, which I continue to drive the board to look at. We finished 2024 with 6,380 unique borrowers to the libraries at SDG, and our goal and our marketing plan is to get that to 7,000. So we have an aggressive plan. So when you see the agenda come out, I'm happy to talk in the next meeting about that communication plan, because we all should know what's going on in our libraries and how we're trying to increase usage and drive awareness to everybody in our communities. The board did a self-evaluation on our internal workings, which I think is really good. We do that every year. It continues to teach us to learn about the board, the library services in general. We are going to enter into a reciprocal agreement for borrowing with North Grenville, with the Kentville branch. So certainly for the individuals that live in the west end of our municipality and then in North Grenville, there's a lot of cross. People work and play in those communities. And Councillor Fraser's branch, South Mountain branch, may get some more activity, which is great for just all the users in the area. And lastly, we as a board have started a book club. So we are going to be ringing where the Crawdaddies sing. So all the board members here have their books. Frank, Steve has your book, and we'll be reading that book. So just to promote literacy throughout our communities, as we continue to go to the libraries. And I plan to be on the Literacy Day at the Iroquois Public School coming up. I plan to be one of the guest speakers reading to the school children. So I encourage all of us to continue to work with our libraries.
Thank you very much. Police Services Board, no meeting. Eastern Ontario Health Unit, Councillor Williams.
I was looking for my notes and didn't find them because I forgot to take them. Did you take notes?
I do have a little bit. I could likely.
Thank you.
There was a meeting on January the 16th. Just see, I know we'd asked, just kind of, it was interesting for myself, so maybe it's interesting for everybody else. Kind of before the pandemic, we had Eastern Ontario Health Unit had about 220 employees. It got down to 180 just as the pandemic was kind of starting, and then during the pandemic went up to 410. So really bumped up the employees during the pandemic. We're back down to 210 now. So kind of things, I think it's kind of an indication we're getting back to normal. They're kind of getting back doing the regular programming they do and the things in the schools and so forth. The budget's going to stay at 1% because they kind of committed to that, but there was some negotiations with the unions, and so I think we had to kind of shuffle a little bit here and there, and maybe a couple of part-time employees weren't able to stay on because we had to keep that budget at 1%, and the unions did get a slight raise, which I think everybody has experienced in their own municipalities. Flu season is pretty normal this year. School vaccines are back to normal, kind of pre-COVID levels. One thing that was talked about a fair amount, local food banks are really struggling. So keep that in mind in your municipalities, and if there's anything we can do to help out, but food banks are struggling. They're having a hard time keeping up with the demand. So that's all I had for that. So, anything jog your mind? No? Okay. Glenstordon Lodge, Mr. Broad.
Thank you, Warden. At the Lodge, we continue to have mini inspections throughout the year. Actually, the inspector showed up while we were there during our board meeting. We continue to get orders and we continue to make the corrections. The last inspection went very well. We had everything in place, but it continues to be a priority at the ministry and in the Lodge. We did invite Family Council to our last board meeting, and they gave a small presentation on, they have a board and where family members meet, so we got an indication on their feelings. We are meeting our occupancy rates, so that continues to be strong, so we get full funding. The City of Cornwall is still recruiting for administrator. Our administrator will be moving on, and we're in the recruiting process for that. And lastly, I finished up my 2 years as chairman of the board of management of the Glenstordon Lodge, and we have elected Sid Gardner the new chair for the next 2 years.
Thank you very much. Questions for Councillor Broad? St. Lawrence River Institute, no meeting. Raisin South Nation Source, no meeting. Municipal Advisory Land Claim, Algonquin Land Claim, no. Regional Incentive Program, Councillor Denson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. No meeting, but the Regional Incentive Program for 2025 has been launched, and so please encourage any businesses in your area to apply, either working directly with Karina or your local EDOs if you have them. The deadline is February 24th. Again, inform your businesses, and I expect we'll have a meeting soon once those applications have been processed by Karina and team.
Thank you. I think Mr. St. Pierre said there was no meeting for the Road Education Committee. Social Development Council, Councillor
Yes,
Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So work for the Social Development Council's ramping up, I should say, for the coming year. They'll be undertaking, many of the similar projects that they do throughout the year. And we did talk a little bit about budget, given that we did fund the Social Development Council again this year, and did have a bit of a discussion about what the future holds in terms of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and whether or not that is going to remain with the Social Development Council or be brought back into the municipality. So that's a discussion we'll have to have at some point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Forest Working Group, no meeting. I will just mention, just from our local agenda, and I don't know if South Nation is the same, but Raisin Region is in the process now of taking orders for trees. So if anybody's interested in that sort of thing, likely South Nation is, I would assume, is doing the same thing. So if that is something anybody's interested in, contact them. And we're on to key information. SDG Salt Management Plan, draft update. Mr. Don.
Thank you. So just a little bit of background on this, and I have to give a acknowledgement to Kimberly Bray, who was the intern here at SDG. Her title was Climate Change Intern, and I believe it was through AMCTO no. Wrong. I'm wrong. Sorry. This is when I was away in North Dundas, so I apologize. I really actually only met Kimberly once or twice in passing, so sorry about this.
Yes, it was through Environmental Leadership Canada, and we got kind of tuned into that one through requests through the EOWC. So there were 3 EOWC municipalities that put forward interest, and so we were fortunate to get Kimberly.
Thank you. So yes, Ms. Bray, as well as Derek when he was here, and over the summertime, our summer student that we had hired in transportation had worked hard at an update to the salt management plan that was originally completed by GHD. This work was done and completed kind of towards the end of summer last year, and just with some other priorities within the department, including County Road 22 and budget and whatnot. It was unfortunately I couldn't get this reviewed and kind of cleaned up and put in front of council. So here we are now. Good time to do it in any event, because we're almost 10 years out from when that original plan, or sorry, the last update was done. In terms of what has changed compared to what GHD had previously completed for the counties, we've identified some updates to how we do our work. So as an example, having capability and capacity to do DLA, which is direct liquid application to roadways. Council may recall we've invested in some of those units over the last couple of years, so we have that capacity and capability. That's recognized in the updated plan. We've switched to calcium chloride as our pre-wetting agent, and that's just better availability, better cost, and effectiveness compared to magnesium chloride. Talking about ARWIS stations, a little bit more detail on using things like pavement temperature to predict when salt application is correct, incorrect, or how to make those strategic decisions, and making sure that we have good information on climate change and salt vulnerable areas, mitigation strategies, things like that. So that's really what this is intended to do, is give council a draft copy looking for comments and feedback. We've also circulated it to the Conservation Authority for their review and feedback, and the intention is to come back to council with the final report, subject to council's review and consideration today. So look forward to any comments council might have.
Thank you, Mr. DeHaan. Any questions? Seeing none, we are at updated SDG Counties Communications Policy, and Mr. Lahue.
Morning, Warden Lang and Council. It's a pleasure to be before you this morning. With your permission, Warden Lang, I can proceed. Thank you. So, Council, as noted in the agenda and in the KAR before you, we've had a full-time communications coordinator now at the county for 5 years, so we thought this would be a good time to have a look at policy and perhaps do a little bit of consolidation. As noted in the, as I said, the policy in the KAR, we are consolidating 3 policies into one. This is being done for ease of efficiency, as well as to ensure we're keeping up with latest trends with respect to social media and mass communicating. I can take you through some of the key changes outlined in the policy. The first one being that public requests for information, they'll be acknowledged within 24 hours and responded to within 3 business days. By and large, this is being done already, but now it's enshrined in policy. As far as security goes, IT services will be responsible for the security of social media channels, and they'll act as the gatekeeper and the back-end monitor for things like Facebook, X, TikTok, and Instagram. Corporate communications will be in charge of the stewardship of those channels, but the IT services will have overarching security. So if we have an individual who may leave the corporation, whether they're in charge of Facebook, X, or TikTok, IT services will look after that program from a security perspective and ensure that when an individual transitions in or transitions out, they can still have access to that, but security will be handled through IT services. Branding, as per the strategic plan, the new communications policy will ensure that we use the correct branding. As you know, the full name and complete name is the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, which is really hard to fit on a marquee. So we've shortened that down to SDG Counties. And you'll notice that in the past, lots of different terms and phrases have been used, from SDG to SDG County, the counties. It's kind of all over the map with respect to that. And we acknowledge that, we're not in a position to change the nomenclature with respect to polite conversation, but in official reports and communications, we'll use SDG Counties from now on. And as mentioned, that dovetails nicely with some of the discussions we had during the strategic planning session a little while back. Moving right along, just for reference, the preferred nomenclature, as I said, for SDG counties municipalities is local municipalities. So we're going to eliminate references to township, the lower tier, or the lower tiers. The media, obviously, SDG counties will make itself available to members of the media and inquiries from the public in a timely manner. Our website, sdgcounties.ca, that will continue to be the chief conveyor of information to the public. So typically what we tend to do with respect to our communications practices is we use social media to promote or point to things that are on our website, and we get traffic through that venture. And then last but not least, while it's not specifically mentioned in this policy, we wanted to mention the streaming of council meetings. So we're going to continue to do that. And as you know, that took place or started during COVID. We're going to continue to stream meetings and committee meetings, council meetings, all that fun stuff when possible. But I just wanted to make it known that in the event we have a technological glitch or something like that, the meeting is still going to proceed. So in the event that we can't stream a meeting, the doors will remain open. All of these meetings are public, and we would encourage the public to attend. So while we will continue that practice, we just wanted to make it clear that in the event some gremlins get into the system, we're just going to go ahead and have the meeting and try to fix that as we go. So that's the basis of my report, Warden Lang. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Have Councillor Broad and then Councillor Dencham.
Thank you, Warden. I do have two. I think that we should include the streaming application when we do and don't, because I did get some questions when we did our training day back in November about in particular why that wasn't streamed, and we have answers for that. But if we kind of noted it in our policy, then we would know for our council meetings as well that if it's not working, we will continue ahead. I think that would be good to note in the policy, that we could refer to that, be at our fingertips. My question though is, on a statistical side, I'd like to see us include what statistics we may report back through our channels. We, at the library board, we continue to talk and work through what the statistics are, how many users we have, how many updates we do, and we can see what channels are working or not working. When new channels come online, we can follow from a statistical standpoint. So I'd like to see that in the policy where we'll have some sort of statistical tracking, and I'll leave it up to Mr. Lahio to figure out what those points may be.
Happy to do so,
Yes.
Warden Lang.
Okay. Councillor Dents.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and I just have to say, this is such an important policy and initiative, and so as I read through it, it just made me feel very, very confident in how the counties is going to portray itself to the public, both for the sake of staff and the sake of council. It has such an opportunity or risk of public opinion of how the counties operates. I love the fact that you're starting to add service levels like the 24-hour turnaround time on acknowledgement of communication. And my hope is that this can also start to set a standard for consistent communication practices across all the various municipalities. So a couple of questions. One, in the document you're saying that you state that each department is responsible for ensuring compliance. And that makes a lot of sense because you can't do it all as one person. Each department has to take ownership of how they represent their piece of the business. But can you talk a little bit about the type of training and monitoring you're going to do to make sure that that the coordinated messaging from all the departments is consistent throughout all of the communications? My second question is, I would love to see this this type of policy rolled down to our local municipalities. So I'm wondering whether or not you have the capacity to kind of come and provide some advice, training, and even some structure to the lower municipalities if they would like to kind of align themselves with some of the practices that you're laid out in your policy.
Through you, Warden Lang, maybe I'll take the second question first because I forget the first one already. Absolutely, the short answer is yes. We'd absolutely love to do that through management. We can certainly set up those appointments. As you know, we do some communication help right now with respect to North Stormont. So yes, absolutely, I'd be happy to do that and to provide those insights. I'm sorry, could you repeat the first question?
That one was about ensuring consistency across the department.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So the way the communications typically works now, 9 times out of 10, is it goes through our department already. So anything that a department may be putting out, so let's say Provincial Offences Court wishes to put out some information with respect to Zoom Court or that sort of thing, that request would come to corporate communications, and we would go about providing that information to the public. So the theme will always, if I may, the theme will be consistent only because it's already going through this department. So typically with respect to public communications from various departments, they rely on corporate communications to do that. I'm going to suggest to you that with respect to this policy, and giving the example I just gave, the part of the policy that may come into more effect with respect to that example would be responding to public inquiries. So acknowledging a request from the public within 24 hours, then providing that response within 3 days.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Williams and then Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I think this is a very important document. I quite agree with my colleagues on that. It really enforces, and I was looking for these 2 words, transparency and accountability, because that is so important, and I found it in the document, which is good. I'm just wondering, to Councillor Broad's point, how come the streaming is not embedded in the document?
It certainly can be. It just, I think the discussions we were having, we just didn't want to be hamstrung by the fact that if this technology is working, that we're sitting here waiting for that to be fixed. We wanted to have the ability to continue to have those meetings. But certainly, if it's council's desire to have that incorporated in the policy specifically, be happy to do that.
Yeah, well, I think there's certainly a way to explain it that isn't going to handcuff us for sure. I think it would be valuable for the public to know that these meetings will continue to be available to them online.
Very good.
Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Warden. I think Morrisburg reported in our council conversation about we had perhaps not streaming, and we are no longer live streaming. We just put it on the website after. So I'm always willing to entertain that conversation, but I can tell you the media does not particularly enjoy that because they like to be able to watch it live. So again, I would think I was on an island on that one. But you did mention twice, and just to make sure, you said if we have gremlins, we don't have to start the meeting, but if we have gremlins mid-meeting, can we continue? So if we're already started streaming, is the literature there so that if something happens mid-meeting that we can continue without streaming or even recording, just because that could happen. It may unlikely to, but just I don't want to see us where we get stuck in the middle of a meeting and can't continue. But you mentioned at the start, certainly, if it's not working. So I just wanted to confirm that if those gremlins occurred, not start a meeting, mid-meeting, that we could continue the meeting.
Through you, Warden Lang, I believe that would be the case, yes. I can say in having streamed or helped to babysit the stream since we started doing that, maybe once that's happened midstream. Typically, once the technology gets going, it continues. It's usually at the beginning of the meeting. But to your point, absolutely, we can ensure that we have that language in the policy as well. Thank you.
Anything further? No. Have you got enough to go on there? It's you're kind of wondering about consolidating. I think you got support. It sounds of it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Council.
Where are we? Social services funding policy, Madam CEO.
Thank you, Warden Lang. So on January the 7th, we met with Councillors Broad, Gaindon, McDonald, and Lang to go over our policy and the framework. Just high level, like we've indicated, like eligibility, aligning it with our strategic priorities. We want to make sure that there's measurable outcomes. We wanted to make sure that we were dealing with established organizations. We wanted to also ensure geographical relevance, like that would primarily benefit the residents of SDG. And we've indicated some exclusions to try and give the public a bit of direction on what we would consider and what we would not consider. We've provided a bit of information on the application process, and the committee provided some feedback on that. And then, ultimately it would come back to council during a budget process for the final decisions. We also want to have some ongoing reporting requirements through the year, so we get information that we can provide subsequent information to council with respect to the funding that's been provided and those outcomes. And so that's sort of the summary of the policy. We also talked briefly about delegations and requests for delegations that come forward to council. We wanted to indicate that if it didn't align with council's strategic priorities, then administratively, we would let them know that that application or that delegation would not be considered. What we also discussed is a notification to council that would let council know that this delegation request has come forward, and based on our policy, we have declined that delegation. But then that would also give council the opportunity, if they thought that that should be reconsidered, they could bring that forward to a council meeting via motion, and then if council wanted to proceed, then we would arrange that. So those were some of the high-level comments during that meeting, but and then we have it here just for council's feedback, and then we'll bring it back once we've had the feedback to council for adoption.
Thank you very much. I'll go with Councillor Gaindo and then Councillor Dencham.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you, in the CAO touched on it briefly, but with respect to decisions made by your office, I think we should just note it under Section 3, the application process, that if you accept or reject a initial application, that it gets communicated back to all of SDG Council. I think it would fit quite well in there. And then under Section 3 of the eligibility criteria, I think we should note that organizations should submit their organizational bylaws in addition to their articles of incorporation. It just shows who the decision makers are, and it makes it a little bit more clean and easy. And then finally, we noted this in our meeting, there's a need to circle back to our procedural bylaw. So in the event that a delegation is rejected under this process, that it's clear that they're not going to be able to sidestep this process. So I think it's got to align with our procedural bylaw. I can help with the language if that becomes necessary. And then I just want to say I think this is a very good job by staff to align with the strategic priorities. We have limited funds in what we can do every year. We've struggled with that the last few budgets. So I think this is a clean and easy way to point to organizations and say, this is the type of items that we'd consider funding, and you point them to that document, and I think that's a very clean, easy, and responsible way to look at these sorts of requests going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Dencham.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And through you, yeah, it's a good policy, and well done to the committee and to staff for doing this. The only thing that I wonder whether or not we want to add a little bit of language around, because when we look at applications of this sort, quite often the conversation starts to go around our mandate and our jurisdiction as a county council. So I'm wondering whether or not there needs to be a little bit of language in there, not that would preclude us or disqualify somebody for that, but simply to say that, that an application would be assessed against the county's mandate and jurisdiction, just so that we set an expectation there. Because I know, at least so far as I've been on here on council, that tends to be where the conversation goes. So in my opinion, I think if we can be really clear on the language, it might help set expectations from my perspective.
Thank you. Is that a response to? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Gaindo.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The committee's considered that. What we were thinking is, in terms of the document that we compare it to, would be the strategic plan. So that alignment with, in terms of mandate, jurisdiction, scope, or priorities, would be looking at that document as kind of the guiding principle, saying we're going to fund as long as it's within what council decided at the beginning of the term as something that's important to us. So hopefully that kind of answers your questions. The mandate, under the Municipal Act is quite broad, so that's kind of the conversation that we had, going back to budget the last few years, where whether it's a mandate versus priority is kind of two different things, but we can point to the strategic plan and say these are the priorities we set, and it kind of confines the the scope of what we would or would not fund. At least that's where the committee, so that's how we turned our mind to it.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, and I kind of thought of that as we went through, and I think you're absolutely right that technically it covers it. But again, my comments are more about setting expectations that and being clear on that. And perhaps you're right, it can be done through the processes established. Like I say, in my experience, we go there very quickly, and so if it's in there, but that's my opinion. We'll leave it up to the committee or other comments around council as to whether or not they want to be a little bit more overt with that particular item. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nystrom. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Densham. It's difficult, right? It's hard to get exactly kind of in the right position that we're actually sort of kind of opening things up. I do have a little bit of concern about, are we actually opening the floodgates here? I thought we were staying away from an application-based program here, but it looks like the idea is to go into an application-based. I think there are advantages and disadvantages of that, because once you're taking in applications, you're saying, yeah, we're actually doing this. And I just want to remind council that we just, I've kind of got mixed feelings about this, in that we just came back from Roma, and we spent a great deal of time at Roma talking to the provincial government about the fact that municipalities are subsidizing provincially mandated programs to the tune of some $5 billion already. Municipalities are subsidizing provincial programs. And the province is responsible for social services. And yet, we're finding ourselves creating a program that actually additionally funds potentially social services. So in as much as I can see the importance of this, certainly, you know, when it came to our long-term care homes and the redevelopments, which likely simply wouldn't have been possible without the support of the counties, you know, I've got that over here. And then I've got the, well, you know, if we've got every social service agency in Cornwall coming and knocking at our door, like, that's going to be a problem. So I'm not sure exactly how we can manage that, but I'm glad to see that there are exclusions in there. Personally, I'd like to see it talk more about, rather than projects that aren't already fully funded, that organizations that are primarily funded by another level of government, you know, why are they coming to us, right? So I'm not sure that this policy addresses that, and I think it needs to, because otherwise I'm concerned that we're going to throw open the door and we'll have a laundry list of applications. My other question to CAO Adams is, or maybe Andrew, how does this impact organizations like chambers of commerce or legions, for example, who have come for funding in the past to us? Things like special interest groups, Lions clubs, organizations like Beyond 21, who do very important work in our communities. But you know, I don't know how those organizations are going to be dealt with, because, you know, as soon as they know that we've got an application process here, they'll probably be looking.
Councillor CAO Williams, do you want to respond to that first?
Thank you, Warden Lang. So you mentioned service clubs, chambers of commerce, those types of organizations, kind of getting back to aligning with our strategic priorities. And then, you know, there could potentially be like a project or like a pilot they were trying to launch. So I think the intent with this policy is that if it does clearly align with what counties council would like to see done for the residents in our or businesses within SDG, then that might fit in. Not from an operating perspective, but if there's a project or if there's a pilot that is out there, then there could be that opportunity. So I don't think that I would say that they would be disqualified. I would say there is an opportunity if it's the right project that aligns with council's strategic priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Budd.
Yeah, I can talk about the application process. There is no fund or no new fund, and there is no new application process we're announcing. What the policy is stating is that if you have a request, these are the things that you have to follow. You have to make an application. You have to have a board of directors. You have to have a charter. You have to have bylaws. And you can't fall under, it's fully funded by other sources. The administrative costs are too high. There's debt repayment, or you're a registered charity. So I think we're not opening up applications. We're not posting applications. This is the application process for someone that has an idea or has something they're working on, how they bring it forward to county council. It's not a new fund, not an application process that we're saying, hey, have all these people apply. It's how, if you have the question, this is what you do.
Thank you. Councillor Denson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I was just thinking a little bit more about the leaning on the strategic priorities of a county council. I think intentionally the strategic plan is built to be very open and broad in nature, because there are many ways that the counties and county council can support various organizations, not just funding, but through advocacy, through just speaking about it. So I think again the strategic plan tends to be very, very open. And although I agree with the fact that it does need to align with the priorities, I still think those priorities are so broad that it doesn't necessarily, like I say, define the procedure. So again, I get the connection, but from my perspective, I just don't think it's enough to set the parameters around a mandate and jurisdiction as we discussed earlier.
Thank you. Anything further? So where are we at? Just want to get a kind of general nod or thumbs up. Are we generally happy with the way it is? Are we looking for a few changes? So we've got a couple that are kind of looking for a few changes. So I think when we wrote it, we were trying to not completely shut any doors, because you never know what's going to come along in the future. We didn't want to have a thing that nothing ever got to council. We wanted them to have an avenue to be able to get to us eventually if they thought it was worthwhile, and then we could make that decision. But at the same time, we don't want to encourage, as Councillor Williams said, the floodgates to open and everybody come through. Councillor McDonald, go ahead.
Again, I'll go with Councillor Broad. I don't really think we're encouraging people. It's what we asked for at the beginning, is we wanted something to go to look at that would be able for us to say no to people. And yeah, I think we have to keep it open, and it's a living document, so it can be changed at any given time. We get to a point where we go, oh, this was a mistake. I think this is a great start with the changes that Andrew suggested. I think it's a great start to get going. And then if we need to make changes in the future, we do that. But I think it's a fantastic document, and I want to thank Councillor Broad who brought this up to me last year. I don't even think I was inaugurated yet, and he was in my office. So anyway, so I'm glad that we have something to go by. But I like it as is with the changes that Andrew suggested.
I'm seeing a general consensus as is. Councillor Williams, something specific?
Yes. No, I agree. I mean, we all asked for something. I'm not trying to be disagreeable here. It is just, and it is a living document, as Councillor McDonald pointed out. We can see how it works and make changes as we go. I agree. I just think in terms of the exclusions, I think it would be worth fleshing out projects already. It states that that it will consider projects already fully funded.
It's excluded.
It's excluded. So, okay. Okay, sorry, I misread that then. Okay, no, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gaino.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you, just to speak to the one issue, the reason why we worded it like that, just in case there was ever projects that were a partnership between the township and the county. So if something's fully funded, if it's something that's clearly in the provincial jurisdiction, we don't want to be taking that on. We've made that very clear. That's not what we want to do. But if there's something that's partially funded, let's say there's a project in your municipality or another municipality where there's going to be funding source from the township, from the county, and maybe external sources, we wanted to keep that open. I think what we were trying to do is very much like what Councillor Denchman said, is this is for pilot projects, big ideas. This is not seeking applications. This is how we deal with applications that come to us. And we want to have a very clear, and I appreciate the comments, because when we wrote our strategic plan, we hadn't had this in mind, that it'd be used as a mechanism determining funding applications. Appreciate those comments. And it's something that going forward we have to be very cognizant of when we're doing our strategic plan. But at least we can say if somebody comes with an application that's clearly not something that council has any appetite for, that we can say that this is not our priority at this time. But at the next term of council, we redo our strategic plan. And if we have different goals, then we outline them in there, and people can potentially bring an application forward at that time. So there's some things that we're going to need to clear up, going forward, especially if it's going to tie to a strat plan that hadn't considered this. But like Councillor McDonald said, I think this is a good start. We see how it plays out, and we make amendments as and when necessary.
Thank you. So I think we have general direction to go ahead with this. Keeping in mind that, as we see how it works, we may have to fine tune it a little bit. I really want to thank the committee. I think there was a lot of thought, and staff ahead of time came to us with something that was very workable. And special thanks to Councillor Gaino, because it almost seemed like he's done this sort of thing before at the committee. He had a lot of good ideas on how to word things and legally make them, so much thanks. So I think there's enough to go ahead on that. And we're on to administrative update. Ms. CEO.
Thank you, Warden Lang. So I've just provided a little bit of information on meetings in December. We have upcoming county council meetings on February 18th and March the 17th. Want to remind everybody that Good Roads is March 30th to April 2nd. It's a little bit early this year in Toronto. And I have a couple of positions that we've indicated that we're recruiting for. So the one is the engineering technician. I think I'd like to highlight that has closed, I believe, and we'll be going through applications, but we're anxious to get that position up and running. And if council has any questions, then I'm available.
Thank you. Questions for CEO? Seeing none, we'll go on to miscellaneous business. Councillor Broad.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for council. Just recently, Thursday, became aware of a mayor Borders Alliance that started up, Mayor Dilkins in Windsor, along with the mayor in Surrey, BC, along the East Coast, started an alliance for all the mayors along the borders, which obviously, there's three of us in this county, the warden falls in. So I have reached out to Mayor Dilkins. I'm going to join the alliance. Justin Towndale, City of Cornwall, already has. I've spoken with Mayor Deschamps, Venerable Cardinal. He's interested. Mary Shanker is away. Mayor McGillis is obviously away, but so they want to reach out. They have some priorities to look forward to. Obviously, a lot of this falls under federal and provincial jurisdiction, but I think that we plan to get a meeting with the mayor along the borders between Brockville to Cornwall, including South Glengarry, just for any strategic conversations. One of the things that there's not really talked a lot about is cross-border travel. If there are tariffs, how does that affect personal shopping, right? Obviously, we understand, truckloads of goods crossing the border and how that affects tariffs, but what about a shopper crossing the border from the U.S. into Canada going back? How's that traffic look like now if tariffs are on many goods on an individual basis? Does that come into play? And then obviously, folks are, social media people have talked to me about changing their choice of purchasing. So shop Canadian more, which is obviously a big deal, but then tourism, right? So if borders become congested with more tariffs, less tourism across the border, obviously we have two bridges that serve SDNG, one, at Johnstown and here in Cornwall. So just want to raise awareness that there's this alliance. I'd like to keep everybody abreasted to all the information that we're sharing so we can keep our communities abreasted. I think for myself, sitting back and doing nothing is not the right thing. I need to be active in it. Obviously, within our community, we have Ross, which exports millions of dollars of goods to the U.S. We're building Safavia, a furniture warehouse, which is going to be exporting to the U.S. from our location. So how those affect all of our projects. And I know we all have similar warehousing, trucking companies all in our communities that are affected the same way. So just want to raise council's awareness that I'm in communications with Mayor Dilkins of Windsor on the alliance he started.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dencham.
I think it's a great initiative. Thank you for pulling that together and working with the mayors. Based on all the topics that you touched on and the impacts it can have, the reality is many of those impacts don't just affect the people who are directly against the St. Lawrence River and directly on the border, because as far as I'm concerned, North Stormont is pretty much on the border. Many of our businesses do business across the border and receive goods from across the border as well. Is there any thought of expanding that to include more than just the mayors who are next to the St. Lawrence?
Yeah, I'm happy to send you the information I've received already and certainly participate. I don't think the intention is just along the borders, but was just starting the conversation, at least from a media posting of what people were talking about. But absolutely, I'll send along for all the councils the information I've received and the contacts if anybody's interested in reaching out. Absolutely, because I agree with you. It's we're all touching it for sure.
Madam CEO.
Perhaps given the interest around the table, we could potentially add that under boards and committees, just with any activity that's going on. And then there's a placeholder for those conversations or updates to happen at every council meeting. So if that's direction from council, then we'll add it to that list.
Everybody's kind of nodding there, so it sounds like we're in agreement. All right. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. Go ahead.
I apologize. I just got notified a former warden of SDG passed away in the last 2 days, and that was Cameron Martell has passed. So that might be folks that have worked with him in the past. He just passed away in the last couple of days. And the obituary is now posted, so I wanted to pass that along to council.
Thank you for that. Ratification bylaw.
It's moved by Councillor MacDonald, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre, that bylaw number 5482, being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by resolution, be read and passed in open council, signed and sealed.
All those in favor? It's carried. And adjournment resolution.
It's moved by Councillor Broad, seconded by Councillor Bergeron, that council adjourn to the call of the chair.
All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. And staff will look after whatever needs to be done as far as lower